Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of stone, silence, and candlelight. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now close your eyes and imagine the cold breath of a medieval night brushing across your face. The air smells of damp limestone and wood smoke. Somewhere in the distance, a bell hums through the fog, slow, patient, eternal. You walk barefoot along a corridor of echoing arches, the stone cool beneath your feet, every sound absorbed by the hush of prayer. You notice how still everything feels. The world outside the monastery sleeps in chaos, wars, hunger, and plague. But here, the night belongs to silence. The monks move like shadows through the hall, their brown robes whispering against the floor. The flicker of candles paints their faces in amber light, each one calm, timeless, devoted. There's a rhythm here, not of the body, but of the soul, steady as breath, endless as the tolling bell. Soon, you'll discover what their nights were truly like. The quiet rituals, the cold stone cells, the secret warmth found in faith and discipline. You'll hear about the strange rules that shaped their lives, the sounds that lulled them to sleep, and the prayers whispered into the darkness centuries ago. So settle in. Let the hum of the distant bells fade into your breathing. Tonight, we'll wander through candlelit corridors and find comfort in the quiet devotion of medieval monks. A world where every whisper mattered and silence itself was holy. The first thing you notice is the sound, or rather, the lack of it. The monastery hums with quiet life, like a great sleeping animal. The air is heavy with stone dust and cool mist drifting in from the hills. Every wall seems to breathe patience. You run your hand along the surface, and it feels rough, pitted with centuries of touch. In this stillness, even your own breath feels too loud, as if interrupting something sacred. The silence of the monastery wasn't emptiness, it was a discipline. Monks took vows that turned quiet into devotion. The world outside spoke in chaos, market cries, steel clashing, children shouting. But inside these walls, every sound was deliberate. Each step meant something. Each breath, a prayer. To them, stillness wasn't the absence of life. It was life refined, purified, polished like a riverstone until nothing unnecessary remained. At night, when the wind pressed its cold fingers through cracks in the walls, the silence deepened. You could hear the distant rustle of a habit brushing stone, or the slow dripping of water from a roof beam. Even these were part of the rhythm, the monastery's heartbeat. It reminded them that time moved whether anyone spoke or not, that eternity was something you could almost hear if you listened closely enough. Most medieval monasteries were built in remote valleys or high hills, far from temptation and noise. The isolation wasn't accidental. It helped the monks focus on God, on work, on stillness. Imagine waking every day knowing that no distraction would ever reach you, except the wind or the tolling bell. There's peace in that, but also a quiet kind of loneliness, one that seeps into your bones. The stone corridors were designed to echo faintly, not to carry conversation, but to make each sound significant. The architects believed that echoes reminded men of eternity, a whisper that never truly ended. Walk long enough through those halls, and you start to hear your own thoughts reflected back, shaped and softened by centuries of prayer. It's a strange comfort, the idea that even your silence joins 1,000 others. Candles burned along narrow walls, their flames wobbling in the draught. The wax smell mingled with damp air and faint traces of incense. To a monk, this wasn't just atmosphere, it was theology. It symbolized divine presence, but also fragility. Each flicker reminded them that faith could tremble and still survive. You imagine kneeling beside them, your knees pressed into cold stone, watching shadows move like ghosts across the ceiling. The nights were long, especially in winter. The monks rose before dawn for the first prayers, called matins. Sometimes the bells would ring at 2 in the morning, their sound heavy and resonant through the valley. You'd wake to that deep tone vibrating in your chest, like the earth itself sighing. Few people today experience sound that pure. No traffic, no hum of electricity, only air, bell, and distance. The silence wasn't meant to suppress emotion, though it often did. It was meant to strip away the unnecessary layers of the self. When you can't fill your day with chatter, you start noticing small things. The way candlelight pools on your hands, the rhythm of your heartbeat, the creak of wood. The monks believed this awareness brought them closer to truth, the kind that doesn't need words to be understood. And yet, there were moments when silence broke, a sneeze, a dropped book, a cough echoing down a hall. No one scolded, they simply waited for the noise to fade, then continued as before. Life always finds a way to make itself heard, even in monasteries. It's comforting, really. The reminder that perfection was never the goal, only peace. You begin to sense that the building itself was alive. The walls stored warmth during the day and exhaled it at night. The floors kept the memory of every step ever taken. When it rained, water sang softly in the gutters like liquid prayer. There's something profoundly human about the architecture, not grand, not ostentatious, just functional beauty made for listening. If you could walk those halls now, centuries later, you'd still feel the hum of devotion. Dust would cling to your shoes, and the same drafts would whisper through the same cracks. Silence ages well. It doesn't rot or crumble, it simply waits, patient as stone. And in that waiting, you realize maybe that's all prayer ever was, the world listening back. Soon, you'll see how this silence shaped everything, how they ate, worked, and even slept. But for now, let's step further inside, past the echoes, into the warmth that glowed beneath the cold stone. You step into the cloister, a square courtyard surrounded by covered walkways. The air here feels softer, touched by the scent of herbs from a small garden in the center. The moonlight filters through the arches, casting silver stripes across the flagstones. Somewhere, a fountain trickles quietly, each drop echoing like a heartbeat. You feel both enclosed and free, as if the air itself has been taught to move slower here. The cloister was more than architecture. It was a philosophy in stone. Its open courtyard symbolized the heart, and the corridors surrounding it represented contemplation. Every step taken here was a meditation. The monks circled these paths daily, hands folded into their sleeves, eyes lowered. Walking became prayer, slow, deliberate, endless. You could almost measure time by their footsteps, steady as the turning of seasons. Candles lined the inner windows, their reflections trembling against the glass. Wax dripped down into small bowls, reused until nothing was wasted. Candlelight was currency, precious, rationed, and earned through labor. For the monks, one candle wasn't just illumination, it was the visible form of patience. You waited, you prayed, and in that light you learned to see. The scent of beeswax filled the air, mingling with cold stone and faint traces of lavender from the garden. It's an oddly comforting perfume, simple, ancient, in a world before soap or perfume that was as clean as life got. Even now, you can imagine breathing in that mix of wax and herb and earth, and feeling something loosen inside you, a kind of quiet honesty. During the day, the cloister was alive with soft sounds, sandals brushing stone, pages turning in the scriptorium, the occasional raven calling from the roof. At night, all fell still again. The only movement came from candle flames, trembling like tiny souls trying to stay awake. There's poetry in that persistence, the way light insists on existing even in places that demand humility. The garden in the center wasn't for decoration. It grew healing herbs, thyme, sage, rosemary, used for medicine and cooking. The monks tended them daily, kneeling in the dirt with quiet devotion. They believed caring for plants was an act of prayer too. It's hard not to agree. There's something divine about nurturing life in silence, watching green leaves push through soil that knows only winter. Sometimes, when the wind shifted, the cloister filled with the faint smell of bread from the kitchen. That scent could make even the most disciplined monk pause. Hunger was a constant companion here. Meals were simple: lentils, bread, water, occasionally cheese, but the aroma alone was enough to feel like grace. In silence, every flavor magnified, every crumb sacred. The cloister also served as a place of teaching. The older monks guided novices here, not with lectures, but by example. They taught how to move slowly, how to breathe with intention, how to fold silence into daily life. You realize that education didn't always need words, just presence, and the patience to repeat the same gesture until it became prayer. At night, the sky above the courtyard stretched open and star-filled. The stone framed it like a window into infinity. Some monks would pause before bed, looking up at constellations that hadn't yet been named by science. They didn't seek answers in the stars, only reminders that creation was vast, and their role was to listen to it. In a way, the stars were just another form of scripture. Every monastery had its rhythm: work, prayer, rest. The cloister was the heartbeat of it all, the place where every path crossed. By day, it hummed with devotion. By night, it exhaled peace. Standing there, you feel how centuries collapse into one moment. The air hasn't changed. The moon still visits. Silence still has shape. Soon, you'll step beyond the cloister, into the sleeping quarters, the humble cells where monks dreamed under the same moonlight. The warmth fades as the stone cools, and you realize that comfort here was always earned. Your feet trace a narrow corridor leading to the dormitory, a long hall carved from chill stone, lined with identical wooden doors. The air feels denser here, touched by old dust and the faint scent of wool. You push one door open and step inside a monk's cell. It's smaller than you imagined, barely enough space for a bed, a desk, and a cross on the wall. Yet it feels complete, as if silence itself fills the empty corners. The walls are rough and uneven, their surfaces pale from candle smoke. A small slit window lets in a thread of light by day and moonbeam by night. No glass, just open air filtered through thin cloth. In winter, wind sneaks through, rattling the wooden frame. It's cold enough that your breath ghosts in front of you. The monks didn't fight the cold, they accepted it, a constant reminder of humility. Their beds were simple, wooden frames with straw mattresses, stuffed anew when the smell of damp became too much. Blankets were woven from coarse wool, heavy and scratchy, but warm enough to survive the frost. Some monks slept fully clothed, their habits wrapped tight around them. Comfort wasn't the point. Endurance was. You lie down, feel the uneven mattress beneath you, and realize even discomfort can become sacred if you stop resisting it. A single candle sits beside the bed, its flame trembling in the draught. Monks weren't supposed to keep them lit long. Light was precious and rationed. But sometimes, after long vigils, one might linger, watching wax melt like time itself. You imagine that small, flickering circle of warmth amid endless darkness, and it feels human, fragile, and timeless all at once. Each monk's belongings fit into a wooden chest, a prayer book, a rosary, perhaps a quill or piece of bread saved for later. Possession was temptation, simplicity, freedom. They weren't minimalists by fashion, but by necessity. The fewer the distractions, the clearer the mind. Modern minds might envy that kind of focus, though few would trade central heating for enlightenment. At night, the hall outside filled with the faint symphony of sleep. Muffled coughs, the creak of wood, the sigh of wind under the eaves. No snoring contests here, only the soft rise and fall of breathing in rhythm. You imagine that sound spreading through the hall like waves, steady, calm, infinite. If peace had a sound, it would be this: quiet breath between stone walls. The cold sharpened their senses. Waking before dawn meant stepping into air that bit at fingers and faces. Sometimes ice formed on their blankets. Still, they rose when the bell called. No excuses, no snooze button. The discipline was brutal but beautiful. Every shiver was a lesson. The body is fleeting, but the soul endures. A curious detail. Some monasteries allowed no fires in sleeping quarters. Fire symbolized passion, which could distract the mind from purity. Imagine spending a lifetime without the comfort of warmth, learning instead to find heat in prayer, in faith, in motion. It sounds unbearable now, yet many monks lived past 60, hardened by devotion and cold mornings. Despite the austerity, there was beauty in their nights. Candlelight reflecting on stone made the room glow like gold leaf in an old manuscript. The air shimmered slightly with the heat of the flame. Shadows danced gently across the cross on the wall, as if the light itself prayed. In that moment, silence and fire shared the same language, devotion without words. You notice how your body adapts to the stillness. The cold stops biting. It simply is. The hard bed no longer feels cruel. It feels honest. Comfort becomes relative, a patch of warm straw, a steady flame, the faint scent of wax. Even now, centuries later, that kind of humility feels revolutionary. Simplicity isn't punishment, it's permission to rest without demand. Before long, the bell will toll again, calling the monks to their midnight office matins. But before that moment, there's a stillness between sleep and prayer, when the night holds its breath. You feel it now, the peace that comes not from comfort, but from surrender. You're half asleep when it happens. A deep, distant sound rolling through the valley. The bell. It begins low, almost a whisper, then swells into a slow heartbeat that fills the air. Each toll vibrates through stone and skin alike. You feel it in your chest more than you hear it. Outside, fog thickens around the tower, muffling the echo until it feels like time itself has slowed down to listen. For the monks, the bell wasn't just an alarm clock, it was the voice of God. It called them to prayer, to discipline, to remembrance. Each hour marked not productivity, but presence. In an age without wristwatches or glowing screens, time lived inside sound. When the bell rang, everyone stopped, wherever they were, whatever they held, and turned their attention heavenward. Imagine a world where time bowed to reverence instead of rush. The bell tower itself was a marvel. Built from limestone blocks, often taller than the chapel, it loomed like a guardian above the cloister. The monks would climb its spiral stairs to strike the great bronze bell by hand. The ropes were thick, rough against the palms, and the effort required strength. You can picture a hooded figure, arms straining as he pulls, breath visible in the cold, body swaying in rhythm with faith. At midnight, when the valley slept, the bell's song carried for miles. Peasants in nearby villages might stir, muttering prayers before rolling back under blankets. Travelers on dark roads would pause their horses, knowing they weren't alone. That's what the bell did. It connected lives through sound, stitching together the faithful and the forgotten under one slow, steady rhythm. Inside the dormitory, monks rose silently, no talking, no yawning. Just movement, robes rustling, sandals sliding against the floor. They made their way toward the chapel, guided only by candlelight. The air smelled of smoke and cold breath. You follow them, your own steps echoing softly. The sound of the bell fades, replaced by something even more profound: collective stillness. Prayer at midnight was a strange comfort. The world outside was dark and unknowable, but inside, words became anchors. Monks chanted psalms in Latin, voices blending like wind through reeds. You don't need to understand the words to feel their weight. It's the sound that matters, measured, steady, timeless. Breathing and belief, perfectly synchronized. Their chants were designed to calm, not excite. Each syllable stretched like slow exhalation. If you've ever drifted to sleep to the hum of a refrigerator or the rhythm of rain, you've touched that same peace. The monks did it through devotion. They breathed their way into stillness. Their prayer was as much a bodily act as a spiritual one, a perfect harmony of lungs and soul. Occasionally, a voice would falter, a cough, a tremor, a pause too long. But the chant continued, swallowing the mistake in gentleness. No one corrected it. Perfection wasn't the goal, surrender was. You can almost hear the subtle beauty in imperfection, how it keeps humanity inside holiness. Even the best choirs today rarely sound so alive. When the prayer ended, the monks bowed and returned to their cells. The corridor filled with the sound of soft sandals, the faint hiss of extinguished candles. The bell struck one last time, a farewell note to the hour. Then nothing. Silence reclaimed the monastery. Not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels full, as if the air still hummed with the memory of devotion. Breath, bell, silence. That was the rhythm of their nights. Each element flowed into the next, as natural as tide and moon. You sense it now in your own breathing, the same ancient pattern repeating itself quietly in you. Soon, you'll see how their mornings began, how dawn painted those same stones gold again, and how prayer turned into labor as the sun rose. The first light of dawn creeps into the cloister like a secret. Soft, grey, hesitant. You feel it before you see it, the air shifting slightly warmer, the stone beginning to glow faintly. The bell rings again, lighter this time, and the sound feels different in daylight. It doesn't demand, it invites. The monks rise without hurry, robes swaying, eyes half closed. No alarm clocks, no chaos, just the slow unfolding of another prayerful morning. Morning in the monastery begins with lauds, the prayer of praise. The chapel fills again, this time with the faint gold of sunrise spilling through narrow windows. Dust motes dance in the beams like silent incense. The monks chant softly, their voices more alive now, yet still measured. You stand among them, hearing how each note carries both fatigue and gratitude, a kind of holy resignation that feels almost peaceful. When the prayers end, no one claps or smiles. They simply bow and move on. The day doesn't start. It continues. To a monk, time isn't something you restart each morning. It's an unbroken river, always flowing, always sacred. You realize how freeing that might be. No rush, no deadlines, just rhythm. The modern world could learn something from that simplicity. Outside, the sky clears into pale blue. Mist curls above the grass, dew glittering like scattered glass. The monastery wakes quietly. Doors creak, sandals shuffle, chickens fuss somewhere in the yard. You smell damp earth and fresh bread carried on the wind. There's beauty in the smallness of it. No engines, no screens, only the modest hum of life rediscovering itself every sunrise. Discipline guided every moment. They prayed, worked, ate, studied, all according to a schedule written centuries before. The rule of Saint Benedict left no room for idleness. To modern eyes, it might seem suffocating, but to the monks, it was freedom. Structure meant peace. Knowing what came next allowed the mind to rest. Ironically, the more rules they followed, the freer they felt. Their gestures reflected that discipline, each movement, pouring water, folding cloth, cutting bread, carried intention. There was elegance in simplicity. Watching a monk sweep the floor could feel like watching a dance, precise and slow. No wasted energy, no performance, just purpose. You wonder what your own days would feel like if you treated every small act as sacred. Work began soon after sunrise. Some tended gardens, others copied manuscripts, others cared for the sick. Each task was prayer disguised as labor. Their world didn't separate wholly from ordinary. Everything was devotion, if done with awareness. It's strangely comforting, the idea that washing dishes or feeding chickens could be spiritual acts. Simplicity, again, proving more profound than spectacle. Even fatigue was welcomed. A tired body meant a busy soul. Some monks worked barefoot in the frost, others hauled water from wells that froze over in winter. No complaints, no comparisons, just breath and motion. The repetition itself became meditative. There's something hypnotic about routine when you stop fighting it. The mind finds quiet inside predictability. By mid-morning, sunlight pooled on the cloister floor, warm and golden. You can almost feel it on your hands. That gentle reminder that even stone can hold warmth if given enough time. The monks didn't worship the sun, but they understood it. Every ray was grace, every shadow a lesson. Balance wasn't an idea, it was built into the architecture of their days. In silence, you begin to notice details. A feather caught in a cobweb, a droplet sliding down moss on the wall, the faint hum of bees waking in the garden. These moments were the real prayers, unscripted, unspoken, entirely alive. The monks knew this, even if they never said it. Some truths are too quiet for words. Soon, the first meal of the day will be ready. Bread, water, maybe something warm if fortune allows. But before that, one final bell rings across the valley, signaling gratitude for the light. You breathe it in, that calm certainty of another simple day, and understand why they called their routine a rhythm, not a prison. The smell reaches you first, warm, yeasty, ancient. It winds through the corridors like invisible incense. The kitchen is alive now, glowing with firelight and steam. You step closer and feel the sudden change in temperature, from cold stone to radiant heat. A monk kneels before the hearth, stirring a pot with slow precision. The wooden spoon creaks against the rim, and somewhere nearby, bread crackles as its crust darkens. Breakfast is a ceremony of its own. The meals were never feasts. They followed the Benedictine rule of moderation. No excess, no gluttony. A monk's portion was small: bread, maybe some broth or porridge, and a cup of water or watered wine. Meat was rare, reserved for illness or celebration. Yet each bite was taken with reverence, as if tasting gratitude itself. Hunger made even the simplest food holy. You think of how rarely we eat with such awareness today. Before every meal, they prayed, not with flowery words, but short blessings whispered together. Gratitude wasn't optional. It was practice. They gave thanks not only for the food, but for the labor that produced it, the fields, the bakers, the weather that allowed the grain to grow. Imagine if every breakfast began that way, acknowledging all invisible hands behind a single slice of bread. The refectory, or dining hall, was long and narrow, its walls whitewashed and bare. Wooden tables stretched end to end, benches polished smooth by decades of use. Candles burned at intervals, their light flickering across bowls and shadows. No one spoke. Meals were eaten in silence while one monk stood at a pulpit reading scripture aloud. His voice filled the hall like gentle rain, words falling over the quiet clatter of spoons. The sound of eating in silence is oddly intimate. The scrape of wood on wood, the occasional cough, the faint sigh after swallowing. You can almost hear it now, 100 small sounds woven into harmony. For them, silence didn't separate, it connected. Eating together without words turned the act into meditation. The food filled the body. The silence filled the soul. Sometimes accidents broke the stillness. A dropped bowl, a sneeze, a stifled laugh. These moments were precious because they reminded everyone that holiness didn't erase humanity. The monks didn't scold. They smiled quietly and continued. There's beauty in forgiveness delivered through silence. No need for punishment when grace is built into the pause between breaths. When meals ended, no one lingered. Bowls were washed, tables wiped, crumbs swept into buckets for birds. Nothing wasted, nothing left behind. Waste was considered a sin against gratitude itself. You can almost smell the faint soap of lye and wood ash as they scrubbed. The kitchen returned to stillness, as if it too prayed after feeding the faithful. In some monasteries, one monk fasted each week on purpose, eating nothing at all. It wasn't punishment, it was empathy. He fasted for those who had no food outside the walls. You imagine that quiet act of solidarity, unseen by most, but deeply felt by those who noticed. It's a reminder that compassion doesn't need witnesses to be real. Bread, though simple, carried deep symbolism. Its rise from dough to loaf mirrored spiritual transformation, the soul rising from the ordinary through discipline and warmth. Each loaf baked in those old stone ovens was, in a way, a sermon. Even now, the smell of fresh bread feels like memory. Soft, forgiving, eternal. After eating, they walked briefly in the cloister, letting the warmth of food settle before returning to work. The day stretched ahead, long, steady, predictable. But in that predictability lay peace. Hunger satisfied, faith renewed, they stepped back into rhythm. You feel it too, that calm fullness that has nothing to do with indulgence and everything to do with gratitude. As the last echoes of breakfast fade, the monastery exhales. The bells are silent for now, the valley still. You sit in the quiet, tracing the scent of smoke and bread lingering in the air, and think, this is what contentment sounds like. You push open a heavy oak door and step into the scriptorium. The smell hits first: ink, parchment, dust, and faint traces of candle smoke. Dozens of monks sit in silence, hunched over wooden desks, quills scratching softly. The air feels thick, almost humid with concentration. You can hear the rhythm of writing: dip, drag, pause, breathe. Each stroke of ink is a prayer in motion. The silence here isn't empty, it hums like thought given shape. The windows are high and narrow, their glass bubbled and imperfect, scattering the morning light into golden ripples across the pages. The effect is mesmerizing. Words glimmer like small miracles. You watch a monk trace a capital letter, his hand trembling slightly from the cold. There's devotion in that tremor, a quiet battle against imperfection. Every manuscript copied here would outlive its maker. They knew that, and it made each line sacred. The tools were simple: reed pens, ink made from oak gall and iron salts, parchment stretched tight as drumskin. Sometimes the ink froze in winter. The monks warmed it with candle heat, careful not to scorch the mixture. You can almost smell the faint metallic tang of it, ancient chemistry meeting faith. Mistakes couldn't be erased, only forgiven. A single blot of ink could ruin a week's labor, yet no one ever swore. They simply started again, patient as stone. The room itself had its own soundtrack, the whisper of turning pages, the scrape of quills, the occasional throat clearing swallowed quickly by shame. To break silence here was like spilling ink. It spread fast, yet, oddly, laughter sometimes hid behind discipline. A dropped pen might draw a tiny smile, quickly buried beneath the hood. Even holiness needs humor to survive repetition. Copying scripture wasn't just transcription, it was meditation. Each word demanded intention, each pause reflected contemplation. Over months, the act reshaped the mind. You begin to feel how repetition can turn chaos into calm, a rhythm of ink and breath. Perhaps the monks discovered the same truth musicians and coders later would. Focus is a kind of prayer. Some manuscripts bore tiny doodles in the margins, rabbits chasing monks, faces peering from letters, jokes only the copyist would understand. Scholars call them marginalia, but they were really small acts of rebellion, a wink hidden inside eternity. It's comforting to think that even the most disciplined souls needed play. Imagine centuries of scholars frowning over a sacred text, never realizing there's a tiny chicken riding a snail in the corner. Hours passed unnoticed here. Meals came and went, candles burned low, and daylight shifted from gold to blue. you sense how time dissolved into ink. A monk might look up from a page and realize winter had turned to spring. The manuscripts preserved history, their creators vanished quietly into it. You wonder if they minded. Maybe anonymity was the final act of faith. To build something beautiful without needing credit, occasionally an error slipped through, a missing word, a misplaced comma. Some monks left gentle notes in the margins. Pray for the scribe, for his hand grew weary. It's hard not to smile at that honesty. You can almost see him stretching his fingers, sighing softly, then returning to his work. Perfection was less important than endurance. The scriptorium's warmth came not from fire, but from the slow friction of effort. You can feel it, a heat that rises from patience itself. Outside, wind rattles the shutters, but inside, devotion hums steady. Every page turned is a heartbeat. Every finished book, a whisper offered to eternity. When you breathe in now, it's as if the air itself carries centuries of concentration. You realize that human focus is fragile and immortal at once, lost in moments, preserved in ink. The monks understood this paradox long before modern minds rediscovered mindfulness. Their silence was a form of time travel, linking every pen stroke to forever. As you leave, you glance back. Candlelight bends through the window, touching the gold leaf on a page. It glows briefly, like sunlight caught in scripture. You carry that shimmer with you, the quiet proof that even silence can create something that sings. Stepping outside, you're greeted by air heavy with dew and the soft rustle of leaves. The monastery's garden spreads before you, perfectly ordered, rows of herbs, cabbages and beans stitched between gravel paths. Bees drift lazily from flower to flower. The earth smells alive, rich with compost and rain. A monk kneels nearby, hands deep in soil, murmuring something too quiet to catch. Here, work and worship share the same rhythm. Dig, breathe, thank. These gardens were lifelines. Monasteries had to be self-sufficient, feeding dozens of mouths through harsh winters. Every plant had purpose: sage for medicine, leeks for stew, lavender to scent the linens. The monks kept careful calendars for planting, their knowledge of seasons more precise than many nobles' grasp of politics. You realize that faith alone didn't sustain them. Botany did too. Devotion grew side by side with vegetables. The work was physical but slow, like the world's gentlest exercise. They dug trenches, pruned vines, and turned compost with quiet persistence. The soil clung to their robes, blackening the hems. In that dirt lay humility, a reminder that even the holiest life still depended on mud. You can smell it now: wet soil, crushed mint, faint smoke from a distant hearth. It's the scent of grounded prayer. Birdsong filled the mornings, and sometimes frogs croaked from a nearby pond. These were their companions. In a way, the garden was more honest than the chapel. No icons, no gold, only cycles of decay and rebirth. To a monk, pulling weeds wasn't drudgery, it was confession. Remove what chokes, keep what nourishes. The metaphor writes itself. Humour crept in here too. Some monks gave names to stubborn plants or cursed moles in Latin, a harmless heresy. Others secretly planted flowers in corners meant only for herbs, smuggling beauty where utility ruled. The abbots rarely punished such crimes. They understood the need for softness in a hard life. You imagine one smiling behind his beard at a rogue rosebush glowing defiantly beside the celery. They worked with tools carved by their own hands, wooden handles smoothed by decades of use. The rhythm of the hoe against soil became a heartbeat. Sweat gathered under the hood, dripping into the earth. It wasn't glamorous, but it was holy. The rule taught that idleness was the enemy of the soul. Yet, in truth, their labor wasn't punishment. It was peace in motion. Meals depended on this dirt. In autumn, they harvested and stored roots in cellars, pickled cabbage, and dried herbs for winter teas. Each task was small, repetitive, necessary. You can almost hear jars sealing, the pop of wax lids cooling. In those simple sounds lived security, proof that faith also needs food. When fatigue came, they paused beneath fig trees, sipping thin ale or water. Conversation was forbidden, but glances spoke enough. Shared exhaustion, quiet pride. The air shimmered with heat and humility. You picture their rough hands, cracked yet gentle, stained green from leaves. Work left its signature on them like scripture written on skin. At dusk, the garden transformed. Fireflies emerged from the hedges, and mist drifted low over the herbs. A bell rang in the distance, calling them back inside. They wiped their hands on tunics, bowed toward the chapel, and left the earth to rest. Even the soil, they believed, deserved Sabbath. Walking through that garden now, centuries later, you'd still find traces. An ancient well, a faint path, maybe a wild rose grown from forgotten roots. The earth remembers hands that loved it. You kneel, press your palm to the ground, and feel warmth rising from below. It's the same warmth they felt, labor turned prayer. And as you stand, twilight settles, that soft in-between light when the world feels neither awake nor asleep. Soon, you'll follow them into the kitchen again, where herbs meet fire, and the scent of devotion becomes something you can taste. The kitchen feels alive in a way few places in the monastery do. You step inside and are immediately met with a wave of warmth and the comforting smell of bread, onions, and wood smoke. Pots hang from hooks, blackened by years of fire. A great hearth dominates one wall, its coals glowing red like the slow pulse of the monastery itself. A monk stirs a cauldron, face lit by the flicker of flames, moving with patient rhythm. Never rushed, never idle. The kitchen was the monastery's secret mercy. Cold cells and silent halls ended here, where heat and scent replaced austerity. Monks rotated duties, one day tending the fire, another scrubbing pots, another kneading dough. Every task was deliberate, done with prayer in mind. You can almost hear the scrape of ladle against iron, the hiss of steam rising from the pot. The room hums with quiet collaboration, a sacred choreography of hunger and gratitude. Most meals began with the same ingredients: barley, leeks, lentils, and hope. Meat was rare, but vegetables thrived in their gardens. They made soups thick enough to stand a spoon in, sometimes flavored with herbs, sometimes just salt if the year was hard. To them, variety was vanity. Sustenance was grace enough. The smell of boiling broth filled the corridors, making even the strictest monks secretly smile. Bread was baked in thick stone ovens, their interiors glowing like miniature suns. You picture a monk sliding loaves in with a wooden peel, the motion slow and reverent. The heat bursts out, smelling of yeast and ash. For a brief moment, the air feels generous, forgiving. Bread wasn't just food. It was community made tangible, the daily miracle no one questioned. The same dough, shaped by many hands, feeding all equally. The kitchen also brewed ale, mild, cloudy, and slightly sour. Water wasn't always safe, and fermentation purified it. Each sip was an act of both survival and celebration. Some monasteries became famous for their beer, exporting barrels to nearby towns. The irony wasn't lost on them. Silence inside, joy outside. A bit of holy mischief wrapped in commerce. You imagine one monk muttering, "For the glory of God," and a little warmth in winter. Fire was a dangerous luxury. Many monasteries banned open flames outside the kitchen, fearing destruction. The kitchen monks were therefore trusted guardians, keepers of warmth and risk. Their robes smelled faintly of smoke, their fingers perpetually smudged with soot. In a place devoted to stillness, they dealt daily with chaos, fire's unpredictable breath. Yet they mastered it, shaping danger into comfort. Despite the labor, laughter lived here. Accidents happened, spilled flour, overboiled soup, a singed sleeve. No one scolded, they simply smiled, wiped, and began again. Even holiness can't resist slapstick when stew splashes onto sandals. You sensed that this was where monks remembered they were human, hungry, clumsy, and endlessly forgiving of both. The rhythm of the kitchen mirrored prayer, heat rising, hands stirring, patience tested. There's something profoundly human in feeding others, even quietly. Each bowl served was communion without ceremony. The monks didn't talk while eating, but the cooks spoke through flavor. It was their language of love, spoken in salt and steam instead of syllables. After meals, ashes were swept and embers banked for morning. The fire never truly died. It simply rested, like everything else in the monastery. You can still hear its faint crackle in your mind, steady as breath. That sound, fire murmuring to stone, might be the oldest comfort known to humankind. If you listen long enough, you can almost believe the kitchen was the monastery's soul. Prayer sustained the spirit, but warmth sustained the will. Faith is easier to find when your hands are thawed, your stomach full, and your world smells faintly of bread. Tomorrow they'll rise early again to bake, to stir, to feed. But tonight, as the embers fade, peace lingers like spice in the air. Simple, fragrant, eternal. In a corner of the monastery, away from the chapel's incense, sits another sacred space, the brewery. The air here smells of barley and sweet decay, the alchemy of fermentation already at work. Large wooden vats line the walls, warm to the touch, each one humming softly with life. A monk leans over a barrel, tasting the froth, murmuring something that might be a prayer, or perhaps just habit. The sound of bubbling liquid feels strangely holy. Beer and ale were not indulgences, but necessities. The water of medieval Europe could sicken even the faithful, so monks brewed to purify. Each sip was cleaner than the wells outside. They called it liquid bread, rich in nutrients and safer than water. You can almost taste it, earthy, slightly sour, with a whisper of smoke. Even abstinence had its loopholes. The rule allowed moderation, and monks, wise as ever, interpreted that generously. Some monasteries perfected the craft so well that kings envied their brews. Recipes guarded as fiercely as relics were passed through generations. Hops, yeast, and patience, the holy trinity of brewing. A batch could take weeks, fermenting in dark cellars that smelled of oak and thyme. The monks saw no contradiction in their labor. Brewing was chemistry, art, and devotion combined, transformation in its purest form. The process itself was rhythmic, boiling, stirring, cooling, waiting. You can hear it if you close your eyes, the clink of ladles, the rush of poured liquid, the sigh of steam escaping the vat. Brewing taught them patience better than any sermon. Nothing could be rushed, nothing forced. Faith, like fermentation, thrived only in stillness. Not all results were divine. Some batches soured beyond redemption. Instead of despairing, they used the spoiled ale for cleaning or as animal feed. Waste wasn't allowed. Failure became resource. You sense how deeply this mindset shaped them. Nothing was ever meaningless. Even mistakes found purpose. A philosophy as refreshing as the drink itself. During festivals or feast days, they shared their beer with travelers and villagers. For a moment, the monastery became the warmest place for miles. Pilgrims drank, sang softly, and fell asleep near the walls, comforted by the scent of malt and smoke. The monks watched quietly, smiling behind their hoods. Perhaps holiness was also found in hospitality, the joy of giving warmth to strangers without asking why they came. Drinking was never gluttonous here. A monk's cup was modest, his sips small. The aim wasn't to escape reality, but to soften it. Even the strongest brew became gentle when taken with gratitude. You can almost hear the faint clink of cups in candlelight, that tender sound of quiet companionship. The brewery, in its way, was another chapel, one dedicated to comfort, humility, and the art of waiting. Some monks experimented endlessly, adjusting grain ratios or drying techniques. Innovation wasn't forbidden. Curiosity was divine when used wisely. One scribe even noted, "He who brews in patience prays twice." You can't help but smile at that. The medieval world had few luxuries, but this, warmth in a cup, was one of them. At night, the cellars glowed faintly from the last lantern. The air stayed thick with yeast and damp wood. You imagine walking among the barrels, hearing faint pops as bubbles rose. It's strangely soothing, a slow, steady rhythm of creation, the kind of sound that lulls you towards sleep, reminding you that good things take time to become what they're meant to be. When dawn came, the barrels rested like sleeping giants. The monks recorded their progress in neat Latin lines, never naming themselves. Their humility fermented as surely as the drink they made. The beer would be shared, the effort forgotten, the peace enduring. You take one last breath, barley, earth, candle wax, and realize that sometimes faith doesn't whisper prayers, it brews them. Soon you'll follow them from warmth to wilderness, where devotion met danger and silence faced the wild world beyond the walls. You step through the monastery gate and the world changes. The air outside feels raw, colder, alive with distant sounds. Crows calling, branches creaking, the hush of wind dragging across moors. Behind you, the bell still hums faintly through the stone, a reminder of order. Before you, chaos stretches wide. Most monks rarely left these walls, yet when they did, it felt like stepping into another planet, one ruled by noise, hunger, and unpredictable mercy. The path leading away from the abbey is lined with moss-covered stones. Each one bears the footprints of centuries of sandals. You imagine how it felt to walk that same road barefoot in winter, toes numb, robes heavy with damp. Yet the monks walked with purpose, never haste. They carried no weapons, only small crosses and pouches of herbs. Faith was their armor, humility their disguise. Outside, the smell of smoke drifted from distant villages, mingling with damp soil and manure. Life out here was rough, loud, and desperate. The peasants who glimpsed a monk often crossed themselves, unsure whether to expect blessing or rebuke, but most monks simply smiled, offered bread, and moved on. The world mistrusted silence, the monks embodied it. That contrast alone was enough to make them seem holy. Some were sent to collect rents or deliver letters, others to tend the sick or preach. Travel was slow and dangerous, wolves, bandits, floods. Yet, remarkably, few were harmed. People believed harming a monk cursed your harvest or doomed your soul. Fear, it seems, was sometimes faith wearing armor. You can picture them walking single file through the forest, brown robes blending into the trees, like earth itself had learned to pray. Rain came often, turning roads into rivers. Cloaks soaked through, sandals squelched, and scrolls had to be wrapped in waxed cloth. The discomfort didn't bother them much. They had already learned to live beneath cold stone. Besides, rain was just another rhythm, heaven's percussion. Some monks even wrote hymns timed to raindrops, finding poetry in what others cursed. You start to see how resilience can become almost beautiful. When night fell, they sought shelter in barns or wayside chapels. They shared straw with travelers, warmed their hands at small fires, and whispered prayers for safety. There was something disarming about their calm. Men who owned nothing, feared nothing, and yet seemed to carry peace wherever they went. To meet one was to meet stillness made flesh. Not all encounters were kind. Some villagers mocked them, calling them beggars of God. Others tested their vows by offering drink or flirtation. The monks smiled, declined, and blessed them anyway. They weren't naive, they simply chose gentleness over pride. That kind of restraint feels almost alien today, but in their world, kindness was rebellion. They brought medicine too, herbs and ointments grown in monastic gardens. A sprig of rosemary for the lungs, honey for wounds, vinegar for fever. Their remedies weren't miracles, but they worked often enough to earn gratitude. People remembered their help long after their names faded. The monastery's silence reached beyond its walls through every healed cough and comforted child. Sometimes they walked for weeks to deliver supplies to famine-stricken regions. Their wagons carried sacks of grain and barrels of ale. Imagine the sight, a line of brown-clad figures trudging through snow, wheels creaking, frost in their beards. They gave away what little they had and returned lighter. It was charity without spectacle, the quiet kind that changes more than gold ever could. Even now you can picture them on those lonely roads, the lantern swinging, the stars watching, the wind whispering psalms in the grass. The world hasn't grown any quieter, but their rhythm lingers somewhere in it. Every act of patience echoes their steps. And every humble gesture, even today, feels like walking beside them for a moment. Soon, the monks will return home, their sandals muddy, their hearts full, their silence deeper for what they've seen. But before that, let's follow them into another calling, one that required courage not of the body, but of the soul. The air in the infirmary is thick with herbs, mint, rosemary, and the sharp sting of vinegar. Sunlight filters through linen curtains, turning the dust into gold. You can hear the faint clink of pottery, the shuffle of sandals, the sigh of someone sleeping in fever. The monks move quietly between beds, their sleeves rolled, their expressions calm. Healing, like prayer, requires patience more than speed. Monks were the doctors of their age. They studied old texts by candlelight, Hippocrates, Galen, even Arabic physicians, blending reason with faith. Their medicine was half science, half hope. They used what they had: honey for wounds, garlic for infection, poppy for pain. Some treatments worked, others didn't. Yet every gesture, even failed ones, carried tenderness. You sense how healing isn't always about cure. Sometimes it's about presence. The sick came from everywhere. Peasants, travelers, even nobles ashamed to be seen in city hospitals. The monastery never refused them. Disease didn't respect class, and neither did compassion. Beds were simple. Straw mattresses covered in linen, replaced weekly if the fever didn't claim them first. The air smelled of sweat and sanctity, of life teetering between pain and prayer. Monks washed wounds with cold water fetched from wells at dawn. The shock made patients gasp, but it cleaned what mattered. They whispered blessings over each cut, not out of superstition, but solidarity. When you live by faith, touch becomes language. A hand on a shoulder says what sermons cannot: you're still here. That might be the truest healing of all. Silence was part of the treatment. No shouting, no panic. The infirmary's peace often did more than the medicine. Even dying men seemed to breathe easier beneath its hush. You imagine lying there, candlelight flickering, a hymn murmuring from the next room. Death didn't feel like an intruder here, only another guest, expected and welcomed gently. Some monks recorded their remedies in secret journals, filling pages with notes like, "This herb cools the liver," or "The patient smiled before sleep." They never claimed discovery, only gratitude. Their books became the foundations of later medical science. It's humbling to think modern hospitals owe part of their calm to these silent healers and their ink-stained hands. There were moments of dark humor too. One monk supposedly prescribed 3 prayers and 1 onion for a stubborn cough. The patient recovered, proving both ingredients useful. You smile, imagining that balance of faith and practicality. It wasn't mockery, it was hope, wrapped in laughter, a medicine still in short supply today. Illness touched them too. Monks who cared for plague victims often fell sick themselves. They accepted it quietly, believing mercy worth the risk. When one died, his brothers buried him at dawn, sang softly, and returned to their rounds. Grief was brief but deep, folded neatly into duty. Their devotion didn't make them immune to sorrow. It simply taught them to carry it with grace. At times, miracles seemed to happen. A wound closed too fast. A fever broke after prayer. A child woke against all odds. The monks didn't call it divine, they called it mercy. To them, everything good was mercy. It's a word that feels heavier now, stretched thin by modern tongues. But in those stone walls, it meant life itself. As the day fades, the infirmary quiets. Candles burn low and the scent of herbs thickens. Somewhere, a patient breathes evenly for the first time in days. The monk smiles, folds his hands, and whispers, "Thanks," not to himself, but to the silence that allowed healing to happen. You exhale with him, feeling the peace settle deep and slow, and beyond the windows, the bell tolls again, not for death this time, but for gratitude. Its echo ripples through the monastery, reminding every soul, awake or asleep, that mercy never truly ends. It only changes form. The confessional wasn't a booth as you might picture it. It was a small wooden bench beneath a cross, the air cold, the silence heavier than stone. You can smell old incense and candle wax soaked into the grain. A monk kneels, fingers clasped tight, eyes lowered. His voice is barely audible, more sigh than speech. There's no priest waiting behind a screen, only another brother sitting beside him, listening like a mirror. Forgiveness here sounded like breathing. Confession in monasteries wasn't about scandal, it was maintenance. Guilt gathered like dust. Slow, invisible, inevitable. A harsh word, a stolen glance, a thought of warmth during prayer. Each one swept clean before it hardened. You realize how different this is from modern guilt, which festers in silence. The monks faced theirs daily, then let it go. There's something freeing in that ritual, sin reduced to routine, like washing hands before supper. Sometimes confessions turned poetic. A scribe might admit, "I thought ill of my ink when it spilled." Another, "I envied the abbot's blanket." These weren't crimes, but small truths. Human moments spoken aloud so they wouldn't rot inside. There's humor in it, gentle, not mocking. It's strangely beautiful to think holiness could coexist with self-deprecation. You can almost hear them chuckling softly, forgiven before they finish speaking. The one listening rarely spoke. He simply nodded, perhaps whispering a psalm. Forgiveness didn't arrive with thunder, it drifted in like dawn. Unnoticed at first, then suddenly everywhere. You can feel it, that quiet lightness spreading through the air after a confession ends. The monk exhales, stands slowly, and walks away a little less burdened. No applause, no absolution ceremony, just silence accepting what words released. Some monasteries practiced communal confession, a circle of brothers sharing aloud, trusting the room not to judge. Imagine that vulnerability in a century ruled by secrecy. Candles flicker, shadows stretch, and one by one, voices rise and fall like waves. Every admission dissolves into the chant of the next. By the end, no one remembers who said what, only that something heavy has been set down. Guilt itself was treated as weather, natural, passing, inevitable. The monks didn't pretend purity, they practiced honesty. To sin is human, one wrote, but to notice it is divine. You think about that for a moment, how awareness itself became their redemption. It's less about punishment, more about paying attention. Modern therapy could learn a thing or two from medieval humility. Sometimes penance meant fasting or extra prayer, but often it was work, sweeping floors, copying psalms. Action restored balance. The monks didn't wallow, they moved. They believed that atonement required the body to echo the heart. You picture one cleaning candle holders in silence, every polished stroke a whispered apology turned into beauty. Confession wasn't limited to words either. A bowed head, a mended robe, an act of patience, all counted. They confessed through behavior, not performance. In a world obsessed with spectacle, there's serenity in that quiet correction. Redemption didn't shout. It breathed softly and went back to work. Of course, not all monks succeeded at humility. Pride sneaked in everywhere, even in holiness. Some bragged about their fasting, others about their silence. The abbot once said, "Even humility can be vain if admired too loudly." You smile. It's true even now. Spiritual ego, the most persistent weed in any garden of virtue. By night's end, the monastery felt lighter, as if its walls themselves had exhaled. The scent of wax and breath mingled in the air. You can almost hear faint murmurs fading into sleep. Forgiveness settling like dust over everything. The monks believed that to rest with a clean heart was the purest prayer. Maybe that's why their dreams came so quietly. And speaking of dreams, that's where we go next. The hours after confession, when guilt fades and imagination takes its turn under candlelight. The monastery at night breathes differently. Candles gutter low, bells sleep, and corridors glow faintly with moonlight leaking through stone slits. You walk barefoot, the floor cold but familiar. The air smells of tallow and damp wood. Somewhere, water drips in a steady rhythm, the monastery's nocturnal heartbeat. The silence isn't empty, it hums with the thoughts of men who prayed themselves into exhaustion. Even in sleep, devotion murmurs beneath the surface. Dreams were both gift and danger. The monks saw them as messengers, sometimes divine, sometimes deceitful. They recorded them carefully, trying to separate revelation from illusion. A dream of fire might mean purification, a dream of laughter, temptation. You can imagine waking from one, heart-pounding, candlelight trembling across the wall, unsure whether you'd been touched by heaven or memory. Sleep itself was never indulgent. They lay on straw mats or wooden boards, wrapped in heavy wool, bodies aching but grateful. Some kept vigil even in bed, murmuring psalms between breaths. Others dreamed of simple things in harvests, home, the warmth of sunlight. There's beauty in that simplicity, no grand visions, no prophecies, just ordinary peace earned by extraordinary restraint. The fears came too. Thunder rolling through the valley, wind howling across roofs, the occasional rat rustling near the wall. Even holiness couldn't banish instinct. One monk wrote, "At night, I fear the dark more than the devil." Honesty like that feels refreshing. Proof that faith doesn't erase fear. It learns to live beside it. You've probably done the same, whispering courage into an empty room. Some monks claim to hear music while asleep, choirs of angels singing through stone. Others swore they saw light blooming from the ceiling, soft as dawn. Maybe exhaustion played tricks, or maybe silence opens doors, noise keeps shut. Either way, they woke calm, their faces serene. Perhaps belief turns dreams into truth simply by expecting them. There were darker visions too, guilt taking shape in shadowed corners. The mind has its own liturgy of ghosts, yet even these were seen as teachers. The devil instructs the vigilant, one abbot said, meaning, fear reminds you you're still human. You smile at that. Theology as therapy, centuries before the term existed. Sometimes, the monks dreamed of laughter. A lost memory of childhood, a mother's voice, a festival long past. They'd wake with tears drying on their cheeks. No one mocked them. Joy was allowed, even if it arrived disguised as longing. In silence, sorrow and happiness sleep in the same bed. Dawn found them renewed, whether dreams were gentle or grim. The bell would sound, and they rose as if pulled by invisible thread. The night's mysteries folded away with the blankets, never analyzed too much. The lesson was simple. Not every vision needs understanding. Some are meant to be carried quietly, like warm stones in the pocket of the soul. The monastery's rhythm absorbed everything, confession, fear, dream, relief, and transformed it into calm. You sense it even now, how peace doesn't come from perfection, but from harmony between light and shadow. The monks mastered that long before anyone named it mindfulness. And as you drift deeper into the stillness, you realize maybe you're dreaming with them now. A shared silence crossing centuries, where every fear softens and every shadow learns to kneel. The bell tolls again, low, deliberate, echoing through the dark like a memory that refuses to fade. You rise with the monks, the air around you cold enough to sting your throat. The corridor glows faintly from torches mounted on the walls. Wax drips down them like frozen tears. Your breath fogs before your face as you walk toward the chapel. Every step feels slow, rehearsed, the body moving before the mind fully wakes. Inside, the chapel flickers with candlelight. Shadows bend across the floor, stretching and folding with each movement of the flame. The monks file silently into their seats, faces half hidden beneath hoods. The air smells of tallow, stone, and faint incense, a scent older than memory itself. You sit among them, and for a moment it feels as though the world outside has stopped breathing altogether. Then, softly, the chanting begins. One voice starts, low, resonant, patient. Another joins, and then another, until the sound becomes a tide rolling through the room. The notes rise and fall like the sea, carrying words you don't understand but somehow feel. It's not music meant to entertain, it's music meant to steady the soul. Each syllable lingers just long enough to dissolve into the next. You find yourself breathing in rhythm with it. The chant, called Compline, marks the final prayer before rest. Its purpose isn't triumph but surrender, to let go of the day's noise and fade into quiet. You hear lines repeated, soft as heartbeat. In manus tuas, Domine. Into your hands, O Lord. The simplicity feels profound. There's no argument, no persuasion, only trust. It's the kind of peace that comes from accepting how small you are and finding comfort in it. Candles waver in unison, as if bowing to the sound. The walls themselves seem to hum. Each monk's voice blends into the others until individuality disappears completely. This was the goal, to lose the self inside something endless. Modern minds might call it meditation, but they simply called it obedience. You begin to understand the beauty of anonymity, how freeing it can be to stop being someone for a while. When the chant ends, silence rushes back like a tide returning to shore. No applause, no sighs, no words. Just the sound of sandals brushing the floor as they rise. Some blow out candles one by one, leaving the room in gradual darkness. You feel each flame die like a heartbeat slowing. the chapel becomes a black ocean of stillness. The only light left glows from the moon through the stained glass, painting the floor in silver fragments. For a moment, you hear something outside, wind grazing the roof, the faint cry of an owl. The world beyond the walls is alive again, yet softer now, tamed by the chant. You realize that sound can shape silence, sculpt it into something holy. The monks knew this instinctively. When the body stills and the voice stops, what remains is truer than either. As they leave, one monk lingers, staring at the extinguished candles. You watch him trace the sign of the cross in the air, lips moving silently. Maybe he's asking forgiveness for something small. Impatience, doubt, hunger. Maybe he's just saying thank you for the warmth. Either way, the gesture feels tender, almost human enough to break your heart. When he finally leaves, you remain seated, listening to your own heartbeat in the dark. Sounds louder than before, but to do alive, rhythmic, patient. For the first time, you understand why they sang, to align the inner pulse with eternity's pace. You close your eyes, and the echoes continue long after the sound has gone. By the time you rise, your body feels lighter, your thoughts gentler. You step out into the cold night again, the stars watching like patient candles, hung too high to reach. And somewhere deep inside, the chant keeps singing, not in your ears, but in your breath. The storm arrives without warning. First the wind, then the rain. A steady hiss against stone, growing louder by the minute. You stand beneath an archway, feeling the air thicken with moisture. The scent of wet earth and smoke fills your lungs. Lightning flashes, illuminating the cloister for a heartbeat. Pale faces, shining roofs, dripping gutters. The thunder follows, slow and rolling, as if the sky itself were praying in a deeper voice. The monks don't panic. They move like they always do, calmly, efficiently. Windows are shuttered, candles shielded, water jars set beneath leaks. This has happened countless times. Storms are sermons in another language. One only silence can interpret. You can feel the monastery itself respond, creaking slightly, as if stretching old bones. Even the stone seems to remember that endurance is its greatest virtue. Inside the chapel, the candles flicker madly, their flames bowing low. The air tastes of wax and ozone. One monk continues to read by the trembling light, his eyes never leaving the page. The wind howls through the cracks, making the chant of the storm blend with scripture. It's strangely harmonious, nature and prayer sharing the same pitch. You realize the monks never saw storms as interruptions. They were part of the liturgy. Rainwater spills through the gutters into barrels, drumming a slow rhythm. Somewhere, a door bangs open and then shut again, echoing down the hall. You can almost feel the heartbeat of the place quicken. Not fear, just alertness. Storms were dangerous. Lightning could strike the tower. Floods could drown the gardens. Yet, even as nature raged, no one raised their voice. The louder the world became, the quieter they grew. You watch one monk kneel near the door, whispering prayers to St. Barbara, patron of protection from lightning. His voice competes with thunder, but never trembles. Faith here isn't loud, it's stubborn. You think of how rare that kind of steadiness feels now. the ability to meet chaos with calm, to see danger and still bow in gratitude. The monks didn't resist storms, they accompanied them. A gust bursts through the hall, scattering papers and smoke. One candle dies, another flares up. The flickering light dances across the crucifix, making the Christ seem to move. For a brief moment, the room feels alive, breathing, trembling, aware. Then the thunder fades, replaced by the softer percussion of rain. The abbey exhales, its tension dissolving like mist. Outside, the garden drowns quietly. Herbs bend under the downpour, their scents released into the air. Rosemary, sage, damp soil. The combination smells almost sweet, as if the earth itself has opened a bottle of perfume meant only for the night. You step closer, rain brushing your face, and feel the strange joy of being small beneath something vast and uncontrollable. Lightning flashes again, revealing the valley below, the dark forest, the winding river, the faint glimmer of distant villages. Somewhere, people curse the storm. Here, the monks thank it. It's all perspective. Where others see punishment, they see renewal. Every flood leaves cleaner air. Every thunder reminds them that creation still speaks. Hours pass like this. Thunder rolling, rain drumming, silence answering. When the storm finally weakens, dawn begins to smudge the edges of the clouds. The bell rings once, hesitant but clear, announcing survival. You feel that sound travel through your bones, reassurance disguised as ritual. The monks emerge, hoods soaked, faces calm. One jokes softly. The roof has prayed louder than we ever could. The others smile, that quiet laughter echoing down the hall. Even the storm couldn't shake their stillness. It only washed it clean. You realize then that peace isn't the absence of storms, it's learning to remain whole while they pass. As the last drops fall from the eaves, sunlight breaks through the mist. The abbey glows wet and golden. Steam rises from the stones like breath. Somewhere, a bird begins to sing, hesitant but hopeful. And once again, the silence returns. Softer, cleaner, and impossibly alive. The monastery didn't measure time the way we do. There were no clocks ticking on walls, no glowing numbers whispering deadlines. Time here lived in bells, slow, steady, sacred. You can hear them now, tolling across the valley, carving the day into prayers. Each hour carried meaning, not minutes. To the monks, the sun was the clock's face, the shadows its hands. Their rhythm belonged to nature, not noise. Imagine a world where hours didn't chase you, but guided you. Dawn meant praise. Midday meant labor. Evening meant reflection. Every moment folded neatly into purpose. The rule of Saint Benedict divided the day into 8 prayers, the canonical hours. Matins before sunrise, lauds with the dawn, prime after breakfast, terce, sext, none, vespers, and finally compline at night. Time itself became prayer, measured not by tasks, but by devotion. There was no such thing as late or early. Bells didn't scold, they reminded. When one rang, a monk stopped whatever he was doing, whether copying scripture or stirring soup, and turned toward the chapel. You can picture it, quills dropping mid-sentence, brooms resting mid-sweep. The world paused. It's strange how beautiful obedience looks when it's voluntary. when it's chosen for peace rather than imposed by fear. The sound of bells travelled far. Farmers in nearby fields often worked to their rhythm, ploughing in step with monastic time. The abbey became the valley's heart, its pulse audible for miles. Even those who didn't pray still found comfort in its consistency. Imagine living your life knowing that, no matter what happened, somewhere nearby, a bell would still ring on time. There's safety in predictability. The monks also tracked celestial time. They observed moon phases, equinoxes and solstices. Their calendars were drawn by hand, elegant circles filled with saints' days and feast markers. Time wasn't linear, it was cyclical. Every season returned with new lessons disguised as repetition. In winter, patience. In spring, renewal. In summer, labor. In autumn, gratitude. Their year was less a race and more a pilgrimage. At night, they studied stars not for navigation, but meditation. Constellations felt like scripture written in light. A monk once wrote, "The sky prays for those who forget how." You imagine standing in that courtyard, neck craned, breath misting, tracing those same constellations centuries later. Orion, Lyra, the Great Bear, unchanged, eternal, still keeping time after all human clocks have broken. Inside, the water clock kept vigil. It was a clay jar with a small hole at the bottom, dripping rhythmically into another bowl. Each drop marked passing moments for the night prayers. It was primitive, yet perfect, a reminder that patience could measure time better than machinery. The monks learned to hear time as music, not as loss. Every drop was an echo of eternity falling gently into now. Even meals obeyed the same rhythm. No one ate or spoke before the bell invited them. No one lingered after. It wasn't control. It was harmony. You can almost hear the quiet clatter of bowls stopping all at once, the scrape of benches in unison. The monastery lived like a single organism, every cell moving in rhythm. You wonder if they even needed language anymore, or if sound alone carried understanding. Sometimes a novice asked when the day would end. The abbot would smile and answer, "It never does. It only continues." That's how they saw it, a seamless thread weaving prayer, sleep, work, and silence into one tapestry. Even death wasn't an ending, only a bell that led to another room. It's hard not to envy that serenity, to live without rushing, without dividing, without losing the present to the next thing. As you listen to the echo of the bell fading, you realize how alien their peace would feel today. No alarms, no screens, no hours wasted counting hours, just the rhythm of the earth itself, gently reminding them that time was never theirs to own, only to inhabit. The monks didn't keep time, they kept company with it. And that companionship made eternity seem closer than ever, not as a distant promise, but as something quietly unfolding one breath at a time. If you could stretch the monastery's routine into a line, it would never end, only loop. Their days were circles, their prayers spirals. Each dawn was a reflection of the last, but never identical. You feel it as you walk the cloister again, the echo of footsteps perfectly aligned with yesterday's. The air smells the same, the bells sound the same, yet something in you has shifted. That's the paradox they lived by. stillness as movement. Repetition, to the monks, wasn't monotony, it was mastery. The same words chanted every morning became deeper each time, like water carving stone. What began as duty transformed into comfort, then revelation. You realize how little variety the soul actually needs. Just presence, repeated often enough to become peace. Maybe that's why the modern mind is restless. It's forgotten how to stay still without growing bored. Their life was one long rehearsal for eternity. The monastery itself symbolized heaven, walls for protection, light for grace, silence for truth. To live here was to live already halfway beyond the world. The monks didn't fear death because, in a way, they practiced it daily, letting go of noise, of ego, of desire. You can almost feel their calm acceptance of endings as natural as dusk. The rhythm of prayer gave structure to everything. Even weariness became sacred. A tired body was proof of devotion fulfilled. They didn't chase meaning. They repeated it until it settled. In that repetition lay transformation. It's easy to forget that eternity isn't somewhere else. It's hidden inside the patterns we survive every day. You begin to sense that the monks knew this long before philosophy found words for it. Seasons turned, and yet life here hardly changed. Snow covered the cloister arches in winter, vines climbed them again in spring. The same bench wore smoother under the same hands. The same candle melted and was remade. The monastery itself became a living metaphor. Nothing lasts, but everything continues. Even loss was a form of renewal. The monks found comfort in that endless returning. Their aging was gentle, unnoticed. One day, a monk simply walked slower. Another took longer to rise from prayer. No one remarked. Time's work was respected. When one died, another took his place, his voice slipping seamlessly into the choir's flow. The sound of the chant never wavered. It was proof that the monastery didn't belong to men, but to rhythm itself. People changed. Harmony remained. The walls carried those echoes. Every word ever spoken here still lingered, compressed into the stone like layers of incense smoke. When wind blew through the corridors, it sounded almost like voices whispering prayers long finished. You listen closely and almost hear them now. Gratitude, regret, wonder, all folded into one eternal murmur. The monastery hums with history, not in memory, but in vibration. To outsiders, such a life seemed small. But inside these walls, infinity felt tangible. Each breath mirrored the tides, each sunrise replayed creation, each bell folded yesterday into today. Eternity wasn't beyond reach, it was the repetition itself. The monks didn't seek newness, they sought depth. And depth, they discovered, has no bottom. In that realization, you find quiet envy. How different it must feel to wake every day certain of meaning, not searching for it, not doubting it, simply living it. You imagine yourself walking among them, letting your own pulse slow to match theirs, learning that peace isn't something to achieve, but something to join. The circle closes where it began. Silence, stone, candlelight. Nothing has changed, and yet everything has. You exhale, slow and steady, as the sound of distant bells fades again into stillness. The monastery returns to its breath, patient, eternal, waiting. and you, without noticing, begin breathing in its rhythm too. The library smells of dust, wax, and wisdom. You step inside and feel the hush settle around you, as though sound itself has agreed to behave. Tall shelves cradle manuscripts bound in worn leather, their spines faded but dignified. Candles flicker beside reading desks where monks sit bent over pages, painting letters that gleam like jewels. Gold leaf catches the light and winks back at you. Faith turned into reflection. Illumination, they called it. The art of decorating scripture until it shimmered. Every swirl, every border, every tiny angel drawn in the margins was a declaration that beauty, too, could be worship. You watch a monk grinding pigments. Lapis lazuli for heaven's blue. Vermilion for divine fire. Malachite for Eden's green. He mixes them with egg yolk and prayer, his hand steady, his breath slow, creation unfolding one line at a time. Some of these pigments were more precious than gold. Lapis came from mines in distant Afghanistan, traded by merchants who never dreamed their cargo would become halos. Each stroke was an act of extravagance wrapped in humility, wealth serving wonder. The paradox fits perfectly here, a life of simplicity illuminated by color, fit for kings. You can almost smell the minerals, earthy and metallic, dissolving into devotion. The pages weren't meant for eyes like yours. Most people would never see them. They were hidden treasures, made not for admiration, but for accuracy. Beauty existed quietly in shadow. You realize how radical that is, to create magnificence you never intend to show off. In that humility, the monks found freedom. Vanity dies quickly when the audience is eternity. Every figure drawn had meaning. A lion symbolized strength, an eagle wisdom, a lamb innocence. Even the borders told stories, vines curling toward heaven, dragons defeated by saints. It's like the pages themselves breathed theology. You imagine one monk smiling faintly as he paints a snail near a saint, a silent joke slipping past centuries of solemnity. Laughter disguised as holiness, the best kind. Light changed everything. As the sun moved across stained glass windows, the manuscripts glowed differently each hour. Morning light made blues sing, dusk deepened the reds. The monks called this God's illumination, as if the pages themselves prayed through color. You think about how modern screens glow endlessly but rarely feel sacred. Maybe what's missing is patience, the hours it takes for light to earn its meaning. Sometimes mistakes crept in, a smudged halo, a crooked border. Instead of discarding the page, they worked around it, turning flaws into flourishes. Imperfection became design. You can almost feel the relief in that, the idea that errors don't ruin beauty, they reveal it. The monks might not have said it aloud, but they knew grace hides best in asymmetry. The finished books were heavy, bound in wood and iron, their pages crackling softly when opened. Each one could take years to complete. When done, the scribe kissed the cover before placing it on the shelf. It wasn't pride, it was farewell. To create something so patient, then let it go, that was devotion distilled to its purest form. At night, the gold on the pages caught candlelight, flickering as though alive. You can picture a lone monk staring at his work, face illuminated by reflections of faith he'd painted himself. The room around him dark, but his pages burning like sunrise. Maybe he didn't think of eternity then, only of color, of light, of peace found through tiny, trembling strokes. The library still hums with that energy centuries later. Dust dances where light once fell. The colors have faded, but the devotion remains trapped between the lines. You close one of those books gently, feeling the weight of hands long gone. Even now, the gold shivers faintly in the dim light. Proof that belief, like pigment, never truly dries. You wouldn't think monks laughed much on, but they did. Quietly, of course, but sincerely. Laughter was another form of prayer here, one that reminded them they were still human beneath the robes. You hear it sometimes in the corridors, soft bursts quickly smothered behind sleeves, echoing off stone before disappearing. It's a beautiful sound, like sunlight sneaking into shadow. Even in silence, joy found a way. Their humor was gentle, never cruel. It lived in wordplay, in small accidents, in irony too subtle for outsiders. A novice tripping over his own robes might earn a dozen hidden smiles. A kitchen monk burning bread twice in a row could turn failure into legend. You realize that laughter in the cloister wasn't rebellion, it was release. A sigh turned musical. Manuscripts sometimes carried jokes too. Doodles of dancing pigs or monks chasing geese with spoons. Marginalia, again, holy mischief preserved forever in ink. One even shows a cat paw print across a psalm, likely the result of a real feline crime. The scribe wrote beneath it, "Cursed be the paws that walked here." You can almost hear the chuckle that followed. Eternity, it seems, has a sense of humor. Feast days were the one time laughter was allowed to spill freely. After long fasts, the refectory filled with stories and mild teasing. Someone would imitate the abbot's walk. Another would claim divine intervention saved the bread from burning. The jokes were harmless, tender. You imagine the echo of that laughter weaving through the same halls where prayers usually whispered, balance restored through mirth. The monks didn't laugh at holiness, they laughed within it. Humor was humility disguised, a reminder that even devotion looks silly from heaven's perspective. If angels weep, one monk wrote, it's only from laughter. You smile at the thought. Maybe sanctity and silliness were never opposites. Maybe they were twins. Sometimes laughter came from absurdity itself, the endless repetition, the cold baths, the snoring in dormitories. Survival demanded humor. Without it, even saints would crack. One abbot supposedly joked, "We pray 7 times a day, but sneeze more often. Perhaps God prefers sneezes." You can almost hear the suppressed giggles that followed, tucked safely behind folded hands. Animals added their own comedy. Geese stormed through gardens, goats escaped cellars, cats claimed laps mid-prayer. The monks tolerated them like unruly parishioners. One chronicle tells of a goose that attended morning prayer daily until someone fed it bread. After that, it never missed a service. The most faithful of us all, they wrote, holiness, it turns out, sometimes waddled. Even in fasting seasons, laughter lingered. The human need for joy refused to vanish. It hid in shared glances, in exaggerated sighs, in mock-serious debates about who could stay silent longest. You sense that, deep down, they knew what psychologists would one day prove. Laughter heals what words cannot. It kept their community alive. When night fell and the rules of silence returned, the echoes of laughter remained, soft, residual warmth between the stones. You feel it even now, centuries later, a ghost of joy humming beneath the solemn air. The abbey might seem austere, but if you listen closely, you can still hear the faint sound of giggles trailing behind robes. Laughter, like prayer, leaves traces. It sanctifies the ordinary. And here, where silence reigned supreme, joy became rebellion disguised as grace. You realize now, holiness without laughter would be unbearable. The monks knew that. That's why heaven, if it's real, probably sounds less like harps and more like laughter, quietly trying not to echo. The monastery didn't just shelter men, it welcomed life in every humble form. Birds nested in the roof beams, bees hummed near the garden walls, and cats prowled the cloister as unofficial guardians. You can almost hear it, the faint flutter of wings in the rafters, the gentle buzz of insects mixing with distant bells. The monks didn't drive them away. They believed every creature carried a fragment of divine order, even the rats that stole crumbs after supper. Each animal played its part. Cats protected manuscripts from mice, dogs guarded gates, geese sounded alarms better than soldiers ever could. The monks watched them closely, learning from their calm acceptance of the present. Animals, one abbot wrote, pray without words. You realize how true that feels. Every chirp, every bleat, every quiet act of survival echoed the same rhythm that ruled the monastery, existence as devotion. The bees fascinated them most. Hives stood near the herb garden, buzzing with patient industry. Honey sweetened their bitter ale and soothed sore throats in winter. The monks saw themselves reflected in the bees. Workers serving a queen they'd never see, building something they might never taste. You can almost smell the honeycomb, warm and golden, the air thick with sweetness and wax. Labor and faith blended perfectly in that hum. Birds taught them music. Swallows darted through open cloisters, their songs weaving with chants. Sometimes a monk paused mid-prayer to listen, smiling at the audacity of a creature singing without permission. They didn't mind. Even sparrows praise God, one said, and they never missed their note. There's something humbling about that, realizing that nature prays more faithfully than humans ever could. They even befriended ravens, creatures outsiders saw as omens. The monks fed them scraps, and in return, the birds cleaned the fields of carrion. Balance disguised as superstition. You imagine one perched on the monastery wall during Vespers, its black feathers gleaming blue under candlelight. It doesn't caw, it listens. Even shadows, it seems, can worship when the world grows still. Not all creatures were peaceful. Wolves howled from distant forests, their cries rolling down the valley like forgotten hymns. The monks prayed for them too. They didn't see beasts as enemies but as reminders of wilderness. The part of creation humans could never fully tame. You can feel the strange comfort in that acceptance. Not everything needs controlling to have meaning. In the colder months, mice sought refuge in dormitories. Instead of traps, the monks gently carried them outside, whispering blessings as if apologizing for the inconvenience. Their kindness seems absurd today, inefficient, naive. Yet maybe that was the point. Compassion doesn't measure worth, it simply recognizes shared breath. You wonder how many nights they spent smiling at the rustle of tiny feet under their beds. Too patient to mind. Some animals became legends. A donkey that bowed during prayers, a dog that refused food until the bell rang, a cat that slept in the abbot's chair. Stories blurred with miracles, but the truth didn't matter. These tales weren't meant to prove faith, they were meant to soften it. Holiness felt warmer when wrapped in fur and feathers. Nature wasn't decoration, it was dialogue. The wind through trees sounded like psalms. Rain tapping the roof was percussion for prayer. Even silence had texture. Alive, responsive, aware. You can almost feel the monastery breathing with its surroundings, neither dominating nor retreating, just existing in rhythm. That's harmony in its purest form, not control, but communion. When a creature died, a bird, a cat, even a bee, the monks buried it quietly in the garden. No speeches, no tears, just a brief bow of respect. Life began, ended, and returned to soil as everything must. Their grief was gentle, their gratitude vast. In a world obsessed with eternity, they found holiness in the fragile. At night, the animals slept while the bells whispered through the valley. The monastery and the wild shared the same peace, breathing together in the dark. You can almost hear it now, the chorus of stillness, the language of life when no one needs to speak. And as the moon drifts higher, you sense the truth the monks already knew. Creation was never quiet, it only spoke softly. By now, you've heard so many sounds, bells, chants, footsteps, rain, yet none stayed longer than the silence between them. That's the secret the monks guarded best. Silence wasn't absence here, it was presence refined. You feel it the moment you step into the chapel alone. The air holds its breath, dust hangs mid-air like stars frozen in time. Even your heartbeat feels too loud, as though it's trespassing on something ancient. The monks called this silence Lectio Divina, the divine reading of nothingness. To them, silence spoke more truth than scripture ever could. They didn't fill it with thoughts or clever words. They listened. You can almost sense what they heard, the soft hum beneath all creation, that quiet thread connecting breath, wind, and eternity. It's not a sound exactly, but an awareness. Once you notice it, you can never unhear it. Their silence had texture. Morning silence was crisp, carrying frost and promise. Noon silence shimmered, heavy with heat and bees. Night silence was velvet, deep, cool, infinite. Each hour brought its own flavor of stillness. The monks learned them all like languages. You begin to realize silence isn't monotone, it's symphonic when you finally stop trying to control it. Silence also healed. When tempers flared, and they did, words weren't used to argue, but withheld until calm returned. The abbot once said, "Speech divides faster than silence mends." You can imagine the peace that followed such discipline, anger dissolving, pride deflating, humility returning. In a way, the monks mastered what most modern souls have forgotten, restraint as compassion. But silence wasn't easy. It demanded surrender. New novices often found it unbearable, the weight of unspoken thoughts pressing louder than bells. They'd fidget, cough, whisper apologies to themselves. Over time, though, the noise inside them quieted. The silence outside met the silence within, and they became one. You feel that same merging now, a slow settling, a still pond after rain. Even the walls learn to echo it. If someone dropped a spoon, the sound rippled endlessly, reminding everyone how fragile quiet really is. That fragility made it sacred. Silence, like glass, only shines when it's intact. Every sound inside the monastery was treated as a guest, welcome but temporary. You catch yourself holding your breath now, afraid to disturb the peace even in imagination. Some called silence a mirror. It reflected your soul with unnerving clarity. You couldn't hide behind chatter or performance. Alone with stillness, you met yourself. Every thought, every shadow. That's why the monks sought it so fiercely. Not to escape the world, but to face it honestly. In quiet, truth loses its disguises. You can feel it settling into you now, that calm honesty that asks for nothing but awareness. There were times when silence broke naturally. Thunder, laughter, the meow of a cat. No one scolded the interruption, they simply folded it into the rhythm. The world, after all, has its own kind of silence, one that holds noise without rejecting it. The monks imitated that mercy. Even sound, when accepted, becomes peaceful. At dusk, when prayers ended, they sat together in wordless companionship. No one needed to speak. Friendship had found quieter forms. Shared presence replaced conversation. You realize how rare that is, to be together without performance, without filling the air with proof of existence. True connection, it seems, makes words optional. When you leave the chapel, the silence follows like a cloak. It clings gently to your thoughts, cooling them. Outside, the world hums, birds, wind, faraway rivers, but everything feels slower now. You're no longer separate from it. You've learned to hear what they heard, the sound beneath sound, the peace beneath everything else, and somewhere in that vast hush, you understand the secret the monks built their lives around. Silence isn't empty. It's where eternity hides, waiting for someone patient enough to listen. There is a small chamber near the chapel, quiet even by monastic standards. The monks call it the room of departures. It smells faintly of beeswax, lavender, and old linen. You can almost feel the cool air brushing your skin as you step inside. The light falls in pale ribbons through a single window, touching a wooden cross at the far wall. Here, the brothers came not to mourn, but to accompany, to help one of their own finish his silence. When a monk grew weak and he was moved here, others tended to him, washing his hands, combing his hair, whispering psalms. No fear, no panic, just stillness. Death wasn't interruption, it was continuation. You can sense that calm acceptance lingering in the air. Even the dying breathed in rhythm with the bells, knowing they'd soon wake in a quieter room beyond sound. The dying monk wasn't alone. One sat beside him, reading softly from the Psalter, the words weaving around each slow breath. Another kept the candle burning, ensuring light met the departing soul halfway. No tears fell. Not because love was absent, but because love was sure. Grief in the monastery was gentle, shaped like gratitude rather than despair. When the breath finally stopped, the silence deepened, almost tangible. A bell rang once, a low note that trembled through the corridors. The brothers gathered to lift the body, their motions slow and practiced. They carried him through the cloister, chanting softly, voices mingling with the rustle of robes. The air filled with the faint scent of incense, earth and heaven meeting in smoke. Burial happened before sunset. The monks dug the grave themselves, their hands moving through soil they'd tended in life. It was the same earth that grew their food, held their herbs, and now received their brother. There was something profoundly symmetrical about it. Creation folding back into creation. No marble markers, no epitaphs. Just a simple wooden cross, and the whisper of wind through the grass. The abbot said a few words, short and soft. He didn't speak of glory or paradise, only of peace. "He has gone to prayer," was the phrase most often used. You can almost hear it now, that understatement more powerful than any sermon. To them, death wasn't an ending, it was a change of posture, from kneeling to resting. Afterward, they returned to work. Silence reclaimed its rhythm. Someone swept the hallway, someone fed the chickens, someone copied scripture. The world continued, but softer. In a monastery, mourning lived quietly, not through absence, but through gentleness. Every action done in the days that followed became a kind of memorial. The empty cell remained untouched for a week. A candle burned there each night, the flame trembling in memory. You imagine the light flickering against the walls, the same glow that once guided his prayers. The candle didn't weep. It merely melted. Maybe that's how the monks saw grief, not as breaking, but as soft surrender to time. New novices often feared this room, avoiding its threshold, but in time, even they learned its peace. Death, after all, was the one vow every monk could keep. The abbey's oldest truth whispered from those walls. What ends in silence was never truly lost. The wind carried that whisper through the cloister, brushing against your face now, faint but certain. If you close your eyes, you can still feel it. The air cool, the wax scent lingering, the faint hum of distant prayer. The monastery breathes on, unafraid, unchanged. Death here is not darkness. It's another shade of light. Centuries pass, and yet the monastery remains. Walls crumble, bells rust, names fade, but the rhythm endures. You can almost see it now, as though time itself kneels here. The stones hold warmth even after the sun has gone. Grass grows over forgotten graves. Bees still hum where monks once prayed. Their voices may have fallen silent, but their silence still speaks. The echo of eternity doesn't roar, it hums. It lives in small continuities, a candle relit, a door repaired, a psalm whispered by a tourist who doesn't know Latin but feels something stir anyway. You can feel that resonance travel through your chest, soft as a second heartbeat. The monks are gone, yet their devotion lingers like perfume in old cloth, faint but persistent. Every act they performed, sweeping, copying, tending, praying, became part of this echo. The world outside has changed beyond recognition, but these vibrations remain. You realize eternity doesn't need grandeur. It survives in quiet repetitions, in the spaces no one thought to preserve. Maybe the monks knew this all along, that immortality hides best in simplicity. Some say echoes fade, yet this one deepens. Each visitor who breathes slower here, each step that softens on the stones, adds to the resonance. The monastery has become a living bell, its tone sustained by gratitude. You stand still, feeling it pass through you, low and endless. It doesn't matter that the hands who built it turned to dust. The sound outlasted the maker. The air itself seems thicker here. Light falls differently, filtered through centuries of devotion. You notice how the silence feels familiar now, like an old friend. It no longer asks you to listen. It simply keeps you company. That's the gift the monks left behind. Not doctrine or discipline, but companionship in stillness. Outside, the world hums with noise, but step back within these walls, and even time seems to slow its breathing. The moss on the stones grows patiently, knowing there's no rush. Rainwater collects in old carvings, shimmering like tears that forgot their sadness. The abbey doesn't resist decay, it turns it into beauty. You feel that lesson settle into you, the art of enduring softly. Some evenings, when fog blankets the valley, it feels as though the past has returned. Shapes move in the mist, not ghosts, but memory itself walking the cloister. You imagine hearing faint chants from nowhere, a harmony that fades when you turn your head. Perhaps eternity isn't a place, but an echo we sometimes notice before it disappears again. As you breathe in, the air feels ancient, not old, but eternal, as if it remembers every prayer ever spoken here. You realize that the monks never sought heaven above, they built it below, brick by humble brick, until the earth itself learned to sing quietly back. That's the echo you hear now, the one that never really stops, and when you finally step away, silence follows. It trails behind like incense, clinging gently to thought and skin. You carry it with you, the rhythm of bells, the hum of bees, the laughter, and the loss. You've joined their circle without noticing. You've learned what they knew. That peace isn't hidden in eternity. It's hidden in every moment that chooses to listen. The night returns like a tide. You can feel it. Slow, certain, patient. The moon hangs above the cloister, pale as a candle floating on dark water. The air tastes faintly of stone dust and lavender. You breathe in, and it feels as though the whole monastery breathes with you. The walls expand and contract, the corridors exhale warmth, and every shadow seems to sway in rhythm with your chest. You walk through the hall in silence, your sandals barely whispering. Every sound arrives softened, the rustle of fabric, the faint sigh of wind through the window slits, the gentle crackle of cooling embers in the kitchen hearth. The world has narrowed to calmness. You feel the edges of things blur. The distance between your breath and eternity grows small enough to touch. In this hour, no prayers are spoken. The silence itself has learned to pray. The monks rest in their cells, faces turned toward heaven even in sleep. The candles have long since melted, their scent lingering like memory. You pass their doors, hearing nothing but the soft rhythm of sleep, a symphony of surrender. The peace here doesn't ask to be noticed. It simply exists. You pause in the cloister. The garden glows faintly under moonlight, dew forming pearls on every blade of grass. Bees sleep inside their hives. The fountain hums quietly, repeating the same note again and again. You stand there, breathing with it. The air feels thick with centuries of stillness, as if the monastery itself is dreaming and you are inside its dream. Far away, an owl calls. The sound rolls through the arches like a question without an answer. You listen, not to respond, but to join it. In this moment, listening feels like prayer. You realize that's what the monks always knew. To listen is to belong. Every living thing here, the owl, the wind, even you, is part of the same long exhale. You close your eyes, and the air cools your eyelids. The scent of wax and rain lingers faintly. For a moment, you think you hear chanting again, but it's only the echo of your own breathing repeating the rhythm of their prayers. Each inhale becomes an amen, each exhale a release. The night holds you as gently as their silence once held them. You begin to sense how infinite quiet can be. It doesn't stop where the walls end. It stretches beyond the valley, beyond the stars. The same stillness you feel now might be the same the monks felt centuries ago. Time collapses under the weight of peace. There's no before or after anymore, only breath. A small breeze drifts through the arches, carrying the faint scent of rosemary and wet stone. It brushes your face like a benediction. The monastery seems to hum again, its pulse steady and slow. Every space inside it, even the empty ones, feels alive. You realize peace doesn't come from stillness. Stillness is peace. You sit on a bench beneath the archway, your palms resting on cool stone. You can feel its warmth stored from the day, fading gradually under your touch. The stone has patience you can only envy. It has listened longer than any human could. You close your eyes again, and the rhythm of your heart begins to match its deep, unhurried beat. If eternity had a sound, it would be this: the hush of old air between prayers, the sigh of wind slipping through iron bells, the quiet murmur of life choosing to rest. You let that sound wrap around you like a cloak. It doesn't ask anything of you. It only waits, kind and certain, until you forget where you end and silence begins. And as you sit there listening, the night deepens. Every breath slows. Every thought folds into stillness. Somewhere, a bell rings once, low, kind, final. The monastery exhales with you, and in that shared breath, you disappear into peace. When morning begins, it doesn't arrive, it reveals itself. You don't notice the first light. It's too gentle for that. It begins as a grey shimmer along the floor, then a soft, golden bloom crawling up the walls. You watch it spread like spilled honey, slow and deliberate. The world seems to remember itself with each ray. The monks once called this hour the resurrection of light, a quiet miracle repeated every day. The bell doesn't ring yet. The silence is still whole. You can hear the faintest stirrings, the wings of a bird waking in the roof, the creak of a wooden beam settling, the rustle of cloth in a faraway cell, the sound of life returning without effort. You breathe it in. The air smells of dew, smoke, and bread not yet baked. Even anticipation feels like prayer here. The sky above the cloister brightens gradually. Its colors shift from silver to rose, then to pale blue. Light filters through stained glass windows, scattering fragments of ruby and sapphire across the floor. You step into one, and for a moment your hands glow red as if holding fire. You realize this is what faith looks like. Light caught briefly, then released. A monk appears at the far end of the hall, moving like shadow given purpose. He carries a candle, though he doesn't need it anymore. The flame flickers in protest against the dawn. You watch him place it gently on a ledge and bow his head. The gesture feels almost like farewell, the night releasing its last breath into the morning. Soon, the bells will ring again, and the world will stir. The monks will gather, voices blending with the hum of bees, the drip of water, the heartbeat of time. But for now, there's this, the brief space between darkness and light, between sleeping and waking. The monastery seems to hold its breath. You hold yours too. The air feels warmer now, brushing your face with invisible hands. You look up, and the sky has turned to gold. Every stone glows softly, each crack filled with sunlight. The same light that touched these walls 1,000 years ago touches you now. It's humbling, this continuity of warmth, this repetition of grace. You realize that every sunrise here is identical yet new. It's the same melody played again, never boring, never rushed. The monks built their lives around this repetition. They understood what most forget, that beauty isn't found in novelty but in constancy. You feel that truth settle in you, deep and quiet, the kind of understanding that doesn't need words. Somewhere, a bell finally rings. Its tone is low and round, neither loud nor sharp. It simply is. The sound moves through the halls like sunlight through mist, illuminating everything it touches. You can feel it in your ribs, like an echo of your own pulse. The day begins not with urgency, but with permission. You close your eyes and breathe once more. The scent of morning bread drifts faintly through the air, promise made tangible. In that warmth, the boundary between prayer and hunger blurs. You understand why the monks blessed every crumb. Even the simplest nourishment carries holiness when met with awareness. And as the full light fills the cloister, you realize that dawn is not the opposite of night. It's its completion. Darkness didn't end. It transformed. Just like the monks, just like breath, just like faith. You smile softly. The rhythm continues, eternal and unbroken. You walk slowly toward the chapel door, carrying silence with you like sunlight in your chest. You hear it before you see it, the slow trickle of water echoing through stone corridors. The sound is patient, circular, endless. It drips from an unseen pipe into a small basin carved centuries ago, each drop sending ripples across the surface. The air smells damp and clean, like the breath of the earth itself. You lean closer, watching how the ripples expand, collide, and disappear. Motion, teaching you how to let go. Water shaped this monastery long before prayer did. It cooled the stone, nourished the gardens, filled the fountain that sang in the cloister. The monks believed water was the first prayer ever spoken by the world. pure, selfless, always returning. You can feel its truth in the rhythm of the drops. No urgency, no exhaustion, only persistence, the kind of patience that could outlast empires. Sometimes monks came here to think. They sat by the fountain, heads bowed, listening until their thoughts dissolved. You do the same now, letting the sound draw you inward. It's as if the water remembers every face that ever leaned close, every confession, every sigh, every whisper of gratitude. Memory has no edges here. It floats freely, carried by sound. You notice how the water catches light. Even the faintest flame becomes multiplied, trembling in reflection. The monks called this illumination by mercy, proof that even darkness could shimmer when met with stillness. You dip your fingers into the basin. It's cold, clear, grounding. For a moment, you feel the centuries between you and them vanish like mist. The same chill, the same peace, the same silence that forgives. Flow was their philosophy. Streams ran through the garden, feeding herbs and vines, while rain gathered in barrels that never overflowed, just enough, always enough. The monks learned generosity from this cycle: give, receive, release. They built their faith on water's lesson, sure, that nothing truly belongs to us, not even the calm we borrow from the world. You breathe with the rhythm now. Inhale with the drop, exhale with the ripple. The sound grows softer, deeper, until it feels like it's coming from inside you. The water no longer flows outside, it flows within. Your heartbeat matches it, your thoughts slow to its pace. You realize the difference between prayer and sleep might simply be a matter of rhythm. A faint wind stirs, brushing across the basin's surface. The ripples reform, glimmering once again. You can almost see the reflection of monks who aren't there. The ghosts of discipline and gentleness. They don't speak. They simply continue their work in stillness, their presence folded into the sound. You close your eyes, and the water becomes time itself, moving but never leaving. When you open them again, the room seems brighter. Dawn or dream, you can't tell. The fountain continues its eternal sentence, a repetition of grace. You reach out once more, touch the surface, and watch the circle spread, wider, softer, vanishing into calm. You understand now why they listened. The sound of water was never noise. It was memory reminding you that peace was always there, waiting to be noticed. And so you stay, breathing in the scent of stone and stillness, letting the water write its rhythm on your pulse. Each drop falls like forgiveness, each ripple like release, until even time feels washed clean. Sleep arrives differently here. It doesn't fall, it rises. It comes from the stone beneath you, from the hush of corridors and the weight of centuries, pressing down with tenderness. You feel it creeping through your limbs like slow warmth, dissolving the last sharp edges of thought. The cloister glows faintly under moonlight, and for a moment, you're not sure if you're dreaming or remembering. The monks dreamed too, though they rarely spoke of it. They saw gardens of silver, stars that sang, rivers flowing backward. Dreams were not fantasies, but messages, the mind's way of praying while the body rested. Some woke with tears, others with laughter, none with fear. They believed God hid lessons in symbols softer than words, ones you could only hear when truly still. You walk through that dream now, the arches stretching endlessly, the walls whispering in Latin you don't understand but somehow feel. The floor beneath your feet reflects starlight as if flooded by heaven's spill. In the distance, a figure passes, hooded, silent, luminous. You don't follow. You simply bow your head. Reverence feels instinctive in dreams like this. Every sound is magnified, your breath, the brush of fabric, the murmur of unseen bells. You begin to notice patterns inside the quiet. Each sound loops, folds back on itself, then fades. The dream teaches repetition again. The same truth the monks lived by. Peace doesn't shout, it circles. You follow that circle until you can't tell where you began. The air thickens with incense and the faint sweetness of beeswax. The light deepens to gold, then to blue, then to something in between. You walk slower, not from fatigue, but from awe. The dream feels patient, infinite. Somewhere in the distance, a psalm hums, not sung by mouths, but by the space itself. The entire monastery seems to breathe through you. You sit beside a pillar, touch its cold surface, and feel vibration. Faint but real, like the memory of chanting embedded in the stone. The monks are gone, but their breath lingers. It moves through every surface, every shadow. You realize you've never been alone here, not once. Solitude is only the illusion of unlistened silence. The world has always been crowded with prayer. Your eyelids grow heavier. The dream tilts gently, like a ship gliding into calm waters. You sense that you're descending, not falling, moving deeper into rest, not away from it. The monks' chants fade into heartbeat, their light into warmth. You don't resist. Surrender feels natural now, even welcome. If you listen closely, you'll notice that the sound of your breathing has become part of the monastery itself. The echoes return it softly, endlessly, as if promising to hold it long after you're gone. You're part of its rhythm now, another small silence folded into the greater one. Somewhere, a final bell rings. It doesn't wake you. It seals you. The dream continues, unbroken, eternal. The monastery watches quietly as you drift beneath its arches, sleeping among echoes and stars. Every wall hums with blessing. Every shadow whispers peace. And just before sleep claims you fully, a thought crosses softly through the stillness. Perhaps the same thought that once lulled a monk to rest. Nothing in this world truly ends, it only returns to silence. You wake, or perhaps you never truly slept. The air feels different, softer, almost fluid. Morning seeps through the window like honey through cloth, golden and slow. You blink, but the light doesn't hurt. It moves around you gently, as if it already knows your shape. Everything glows, the floor, the dust, even the silence itself. The monastery feels lighter, emptied of weight, but filled with meaning. You realize peace can have mass, invisible but undeniable. The monks believed light carried memory. Every dawn was not new, but cumulative, each sunrise borrowing brightness from the last. You can almost see it layering in the air, century upon century of mornings stacked delicately on top of one another. The glow feels thick enough to touch, as if you could press your hand into it and feel warmth from 1,000 years ago. The walls shimmer faintly, their rough texture softened by illumination. Tiny flecks of mica in the stone reflect the sun like hidden jewels. The monks never built this for grandeur, yet beauty insists on blooming through restraint. You breathe it in, dust, warmth, and faint incense from prayers that ended long ago but still linger, invisible threads binding heaven to stone. A breeze stirs, carrying the sound of a bell from somewhere distant. It's not calling, it's reminding. Each tone lands gently on your chest, resonating with your pulse. You begin to sense what the monks always knew, that the body is an instrument, tuned by light and silence until it vibrates with both. You don't have to try. You only have to stay still long enough to hear yourself being played by the morning. The shadows move like water, sliding across the floor in slow arcs. You follow their journey, eyes half closed. The world is moving, yet nothing feels rushed. The sun climbs, the light thickens, and you feel yourself dissolve a little more into the calm. There is no urgency in illumination, only invitation. To see without reaching, to receive without holding. In this brightness, time loses shape. Moments overlap until all hours feel identical, each one repeating softly inside the other. It's disorienting at first, then freeing. The monks once called this claritas, the clarity that comes when the self grows transparent. You feel it happening, thoughts passing through you without resistance, emotions floating by like leaves on sunlight. You realize that this is what surrender truly means. Not defeat, but acceptance. The monastery never conquered darkness. It befriended it, taught it to hold light. You sense that balance now, a quiet truce between contrast and harmony. Every shadow deepens the brightness, every breath refines the silence. You exist somewhere between both, belonging to neither completely. Outside, the garden stirs awake. Bees move lazily through lavender, their wings flashing like tiny mirrors. The fountain gleams, throwing thin arcs of light that shatter into rainbows mid-air. You watch them fall and vanish, fragments of brilliance returning to stillness. It feels like prophecy disguised as physics. Even radiance must rest eventually. The warmth grows. It presses against your skin, then seeps deeper into thought, into memory. You imagine the monks waking centuries ago, faces lifted to the same light, eyelids glowing amber through closed eyes. You are them, and they are you. The moment folds perfectly. One body of devotion stretched through time, breathing in unison across generations. You close your eyes again, and behind them, the light remains. It doesn't fade, it hums, steady and soft. You realize the monastery doesn't live in stone anymore. It lives in illumination, the way stillness shines quietly from within. You've become part of its glow now, another thread in the endless fabric of dawn. And as you sit in that radiance, thought dissolves, breath slows, and even the light feels weightless. The world has learned how to rest again, and so have you. It begins so softly you almost miss it. A hum at first, deep and low, curling through the morning like mist. Then a vibration, growing clearer, the bell. But this time it doesn't strike, it breathes. The sound expands instead of echoes, filling every corridor, every corner, every pulse. You can't tell whether it's ringing outside or inside you. It seems to originate from somewhere older than time, somewhere familiar as heartbeat. The monks once said the bell was the voice of balance, neither command nor comfort, but both. It called the world to awareness without breaking its peace. You listen now, and the tone deepens, layering itself endlessly. Each wave folds into the next until there's no beginning, no end. The bell becomes horizon, atmosphere, ocean. You feel yourself floating inside it. The sound doesn't push the air, it steadies it. Dust motes freeze mid-flight. Beams of sunlight hang motionless. Even your breath slows to match its rhythm. Long, deliberate, forgiving. You realize the bell isn't telling time anymore. It's suspending it. Every vibration says the same thing in different ways. Stay. If sound had texture, this one would feel like silk. Smooth but strong, woven from warmth and patience. You imagine the monk in the tower centuries ago, pulling the rope with both hands, unaware that the note he summoned would still resonate through time. His effort long finished, his breath long gone, yet the tone persists. That's eternity's secret. Continuation without effort. The resonance moves through the stone, into your bones. You feel the walls pulse faintly, the bench beneath you hum. The entire monastery becomes an instrument again, tuned perfectly to serenity. Every surface sings quietly back to the bell, and the harmony spreads outward, through trees, through mist, through everything that still remembers silence. Then the tone softens, stretches thinner, as though the air itself is exhaling. You close your eyes, following it down into quiet. The sound narrows to a thread, then to a shimmer, then to nothing, except it isn't gone. It's changed form, hidden itself inside stillness. You can still feel it in your breath, in your heartbeat, in the warmth of your hands. The bell is no longer heard, it's carried. For a while, you sit there, unsure if the world has ended or simply paused. The air doesn't move. Light holds its breath. Peace has shape now, round and golden, echoing faintly behind your ribs. You understand what the monks meant when they said, God speaks once, and we spend a lifetime listening. Outside, another bell answers, fainter, distant, like memory calling to itself across time. Two tones meet in the valley, overlap, then fade together. The sound feels infinite but kind. You realize that every echo you've ever heard is just one bell trying to find another. Connection disguised as sound. When silence finally settles again, it's not empty. It vibrates softly, like afterglow. The bell's echo lingers in your chest long after the air has gone still. It will follow you when you leave, humming quietly beneath everything. A promise that peace can be recalled by memory alone. You breathe once, slow and deliberate. The vibration fades completely. The monastery sighs with you, stone and skin exhaling in unison. And for a moment, maybe the first, maybe the last, there is nothing left to separate sound from silence, you from them, or the present from forever. The day has stretched long enough to forget where it began. Sunlight drips through the arches, soft as melted gold, and the air has grown warm and heavy. The kind that holds sound like glass, holds water. You sit beneath the cloister's shade, eyes half open, body weightless. Time has lost its edges. Every movement is gentle now, every thought a ripple that fades before it forms. You can smell lavender from the garden and the faint sweetness of baked bread, cooling somewhere unseen. The world feels close, intimate, smaller in the best way, as though existence has folded inward to rest. The monastery hums quietly, not from activity but from presence. Stillness has become a physical thing, wrapping itself around you like a cloak woven from patience. The monks used to say that peace wasn't the absence of movement, it was movement too slow to see. You begin to understand. The sunlight shifts almost imperceptibly, sliding across the floor. Shadows breathe, even the air seems to bend with care. It's as if creation itself has slowed down enough to remember what it's doing. You look toward the fountain, its water glinting in the light. Each drop rises, falls, disappears. Repetition without fatigue. There's comfort in that, a rhythm too steady to doubt. The monks built their lives around such patterns, trusting that constancy could heal what chaos broke. You feel it working now, gently smoothing the creases of your thoughts. You lean back, and the stone beneath you feels alive, warm from centuries of sunlight, cool beneath the surface. You trace its roughness with your fingertips, finding beauty in the imperfections. This wall has seen more prayers than any book ever could. Every scrape, every dent, every whisper left its mark. You realize that stillness doesn't erase the past, it gathers it. Above you, swallows dart through the arches, their wings slicing the silence without breaking it. Their motion feels like punctuation, quick, effortless, precise. They vanish, reappear, vanish again. The pattern comforts you. You begin to feel that everything belongs here. Movement, quiet, breath, pause, each part completing the other. Your eyes grow heavier. The light flickers as clouds drift by, turning gold to silver, silver to grey. The air cools, brushing your skin like linen. You exhale, long and slow, and notice how even your sigh sounds ancient here, as if it's been rehearsed 1,000 times by others before you. You're not imitating them. You're joining them. Stillness deepen. You can no longer tell where your body ends and the air begins. The scent of herbs, the warmth of stone, the rhythm of water, all merge into one long note. The monastery seems to dissolve into breath, leaving behind only quiet. Not the kind that waits for sound, the kind that no longer needs it. You understand now what they meant by eternity. It isn't a place or a promise. It's this, the pause between two breaths that never ends. You stay there, suspended, untouched by past or future. Even sleep hesitates, as if bowing before peace too complete to disturb. And when it finally comes, it doesn't arrive like darkness. It arrives like soft hands closing over light. Night returns one last time, though you hardly notice. The transition is seamless, day fading into dusk, light folding itself quietly into the horizon. The sky turns to deep violet, the first stars trembling above the abbey roof. The air cools, carrying the scent of damp stone and candle smoke. You breathe it in and feel yourself settling deeper, slower, into quiet that feels older than time. Inside, candles flicker like patient hearts. A few monks remain awake, tending the final lights. Their faces glow gold against the dark, their shadows long and kind. You watch one lift a candle, shielding it from the wind. The gesture feels sacred, not because of ritual, but because of care, the small, wordless love that keeps light alive. Outside, the bell rings once more, not to summon, not to signal, but simply to remind. The note drifts over the valley, lingering on the cool air. It fades slowly, gently, until even the echo stops trying to exist. In that silence, you feel everything align. The world, your breath, your heart, the soft pull of gravity guiding you toward rest. It's not sleep yet, but the moment before, where thought loosens and surrender begins. You lie back on the cool stone floor, eyes tracing the faint light still clinging to the ceiling. Dust floats in the air, turning each breath into a constellation. You realize how kind the world is when it stops demanding to be understood. The monks lived that way, not solving life, only receiving it. You let that wisdom settle inside you like warm sand in water. The air thickens with stillness. You can hear your heartbeat, slow and steady, echoing faintly in the space. It sounds like a drum keeping time with eternity. You exhale, and the sound fades into the walls. You've become part of the monastery now. Another voice absorbed by stone, another breath folded into the silence that has always been here. Thoughts drift in and out, each one softer than the last. They stop trying to form sentences. Meaning dissolves into rhythm. The world narrows to sensation, the faint hum of night, the pulse behind your eyelids, the coolness of the air. You feel yourself floating slightly, untethered, but safe. If peace could cradle, this is how it would feel. Somewhere far away, or maybe within, a final candle gutters out. Darkness doesn't swallow the room, it completes it, you understand? At last, what the monks built all this for, not for worship, not for glory, but for this, the quiet moment when everything finally stops needing to continue. You breathe one last conscious breath, slow and grateful. The silence around you doesn't feel empty, it feels full, alive, infinite. It holds everything that ever was and everything that ever will be. You let go completely, sinking into it like water absorbing rain. And as you drift beyond thought, one last whisper passes through you, gentle, wordless, eternal. Peace was never somewhere else. It was always here, waiting for you to listen. Good night, traveler. You've walked through the silence, the bells, the breath of centuries. You've wandered the corridors where even time learned how to rest. Now, all that remains is peace, soft, weightless, ancient. Let the stillness stay with you as you drift away. Let the echoes of prayer hum beneath your dreams, and the light of the monastery linger behind your eyes like dawn that never ends. You don't need to think, or remember, or hold anything. Just breathe. The world is still here, waiting, gentle and quiet. Thank you for keeping me company tonight. Until next time, may your dreams be warm, your heart untroubled, and your silence full of light. Before you go, if your eyes are still open, remember to like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And now, close your eyes. The monastery will keep watch. Sleep well.